They helped the United States. They gave us military, they gave us ships, they gave us soldiers. A lot of the most brilliant officers of France were brought to America. What did the American Revolution win get for France? Democracy, absolutely. So they borrowed from our ideas, but it also put the aristocracy and the nobility in huge debt, the worst credit card debt you could possibly imagine. So it bankrupted the monarchy. They went into a situation where they also had a famine. So in the end of it, they had a famine on top of huge debt, which basically led to the bankruptcy of the nation. And then the French Revolution came about because of starvation. And they attacked the Bastille. The government was overthrown. So everybody attached to the clergy, to the aristocracy, the nobility, were executed. Over 16,000 people in Paris alone were killed between 1892 and 1894. It's a lot of peeps. From that chaos came order in the form of Napoleon Bonaparte. And as soon as Napoleon Bonaparte came about, what was his major idea? Say it again. Conquer the world for what purpose? He wanted to spread the three ideas of the revolution to the rest of the world: liberty, fraternity, equality. He's like, he literally said this. I mean, it's not like you have to read between the lines. He's like, we're taking our French revolutionary ideas and we're going to export them to the rest of the world. That's why he wanted to become the emperor of Europe, because everybody's going to have this. So from there, we had this wonderful map, and I think it was right before this, where we were going to talk about all the nations around Europe that started to fall as a result of the French Revolution. And the last two, the two biggies are what? In 1917, the two empires that fell.
Bolshevik Revolution.
The Bolshevik Revolution and the Ottoman Empire, excellent. So those were the last two. These ideas of liberty, fraternity, and equality destroy the monarchies of all these countries in Europe and around the world. But the last two big ones to fall were this. The reason why I have this photo up is to show that even during World War I, the Jews were very loyal to whatever country they were in and served in the officer. We read about the very famous affair in France that went against a Jewish officer, and that was known as the blank affair. What was that called? Dreyfus Affair. Very good. So anti-Semitism was always there. It was just like this seething little fire underneath the surface that was waiting to come about. So here they are in 1916, and that's a very important year we're going to be talking about. And in less than 20 years, they were going to be the victims of their own country. They're serving their country, and by 1933, they're going to be the victims of this country. So there's a lot of significant things that happen there. How many of you all have seen the movie Lawrence of Arabia? It's 3 hours, it's very long. Okay, it's a great story, and what is so fascinating about it to me, who was this guy? What was he trained to do originally? He was a cartographer. He made maps with ink on mylar and watercolor, okay? They were making maps of the Middle East. And he was used because he could speak several different languages. And the British, who were in Egypt, they were in Palestine, were trying to figure out how to get all these Bedouin tribes united against the Ottomans. And they couldn't do it. They kept trying and trying. Nothing worked. And because he's a cartographer, does he know where every well is in the Middle East? Pretty much. Does he know where all the resources are? He knows the language, and he knows the people, because without knowing the people, you can't go out there and make maps. So he goes and starts what became known as the Arab Revolt on 5 June 1916, and he forces the command of Sharaf Hussein in Ali's son and the Emir of Faisal to attack the Ottoman garrison in Medina. So why this is so crazy, he goes out there to talk with them. The British, do they have any confidence in Lawrence? No, he's an annoyance. His uniform's a mess. Oh my gosh. He shows up to the club with foreigners. I'm like, no. You know, all these things that offend them and rough their fellows the wrong way is what this guy is. And so he gets all of these Arab desperate peoples who are constantly fighting among themselves to stop fighting, join forces, and attack the Ottomans, which was so incredible. So this feat, if you ever see it in the movie, blows people's minds. He marches 3 days across a desert to take Medina, which has guns pointing out at the Persian Sea. Anyway, everybody tells him, you can't do this, you can't do this. He's like, well, the reason why we're doing this because they can't do it with a naval attack because all the guns are pointed at the sea and they can't be turned around. So if we march through the desert and attack them from land, we'll win. So that's exactly what they did. And they took this port city of Medina, and that starts the whole thing off where they're able to attack troop trains and resources all over the desert. This is a map. I'm gonna see if I can use my laser on this. The laser is it the top one? Hello, there it is, okay. So he goes from way down here up the peninsula, that's Aqaba, and then all the way up to Syria, and this is the Arab revolt in red, and then the British advance was to go from Cairo up to Aleppo. So this whole area is the Ottoman Empire in orange, you see around here. And then the Russian Empire, they were in the war, but they had to get out in 1917. It was actually an American journalist who wrote about 10 Days That Shook the World. He was from Oregon, and he basically wrote what had happened to the fall of the Russian Empire. So by the end of July, the ports of Reddish and Yuba were in Arab hands, allowing the British to greatly increase the supply of arms and equipment to the Arab forces in Jahaz. According to the ports, allowed for the landing of the first units of Arab regular army, Ottoman soldiers captured the British at Gallipoli in Mesopotamia or Sinai, who had subsequently volunteered to fight in the Arab national cause. So basically, there was because they were able to fight with the British, there was a lot more successes and how they got there. So, yes.
These Arabs under Lawrence of Arabia, were they moving forward on camels or trucks, or how were they moving?
As they captured more, they had horses and camels, but as they traveled more, they were able to take over some trucks, some vehicles that belonged to the Ottomans. But it was pretty much still a Bedouin group. But they never knew where they went. They just disappeared into the wilderness, and then they would attack a troop train or attack power lines or cable lines and disappear. So as early as 1909, Lawrence wrote about the then undefined Palestinian. And you're not going to believe it. This is written in like 1909. I mean, that's way before he was even doing all of this. He says, the sooner the Jews farm it, the better. Their countries are bright spots in a desert. His advocacy of this vein would extend to the post-World War I conferences that craved out-of-nation states in the Middle East. Lawrence served as the mediator between the Hashemite Prince Faisal, who would later become the king of Iraq, and Chaim Weizmann, later the first president of Israel. Lawrence's goal, he said, was to secure the lines of Arab and Zionist policy converging in the not distant future. And he was right. Once the Jews reclaimed the land, and we're going to talk a lot about that, it became the bright spot in the entire Middle East, not just the desert. Yes?
He did not call it Palestine.
No.
He didn't call it. The term Palestine doesn't come up until much later,
Right,
as a propaganda piece.
absolutely, absolutely. And let's not confuse who we see today in the Middle East, the Palestinians, with the Philistines. From what I've read, the Philistines were destroyed basically at the time of the Babylonian invasion. but and they were from Phoenicia originally and settled in the land. So it's just important to make those little distinctions. Any more questions? We're good. Okay. So we're going to talk a lot about Chaim Weissman. He is a name you've got to remember. I mean, it's just incredible what Chaim Weissman did, or Chaim Weissman. Lawrence debunked the most obvious dishonesty of anti-Israel myths, which circulated widely in Europe and the Arab world and Iran, namely that the Jews lacked the presence in the pre-Christian and pre-Islamic Palestine. While he recognized in his writings the continuous presence of the Jews and pre-Zionist movement of Palestine, Lawrence noted, the colonists will take back with them to the land which they occupied for some centuries before the Christian era samples of all the knowledge and techniques of Europe. They proposed to settle down amongst the existing Arab-speaking population of the country, a people of kindred origin, but far different social conditions. They hoped to adjust their modes of life and the climate of Palestine, and by the exercise of their skill and capital to make it as highly organized as a European state. So if you remember what we said about Theodor Herzl in Alt Neuland, Old New Land, what did he want the modern Jew to become? Secular, modern. Modern. We're going to get rid of everything from the past. We're going to be secular, and we're going to lean everything on science and technology, not God, science and technology. Lawrence's biggest success was his advocacy of Zionism, leading to the eventual creation of the State of Israel. Lawrence's vision would become a reality. Israel rapidly became the freest and most advanced capital economy in the Middle East. So you look at the numbers today, it has the top universities in that part of the world over everything else. Top in medicine, top in science, advancing the world wherever it goes. So there's a lot to say about this. This is the thing I want you to like engrave in your brain that you've got to remember. The Sykes-Picot Agreement. Okay, so I want you to picture a nice little men's club in Britain where guys are sitting around in leather chairs and they're smoking their cigars and sipping on cognac, okay? When the war's over, what do you want? Well, I'll take the Saudi Arabian Peninsula. Well, what do you want? I'll take Syria. What do you want? I'll take Jordan. So the Sykes-Picot Agreement was a gentleman's agreement between France and Great Britain and the other powers that says, when World War I is over, what are we going to get? What do you want? What do I want? And so this was set up by two guys, Sir Mark Sykes, who's the British, and then George Picot, who's the French. Who are they? Surveyors. They are going to carve up the Middle East and make it what it is today. Ever heard of Sykes and Picot before? Some people have. Most people have never heard of them. So Italy was going to get the southern part of Anatolia. The French were going to get all the stuff in blue, which is Syria, part of modern day Iraq, and part of Turkey. The Russians, who bowed out of the war, were going to get Jordan and Iraq. They were going to get the northern part, the top part of Armenia and Turkey. And then the British were going to have Jordan and Iraq. So you can see what a mess this makes, because this is all being divvied up and chopped up by European powers. Did it take in consideration any of the native tribes in the Middle East? Did it take in consideration any of the religious sects in the Middle East? No. Yes?
The purpose of their consideration was to make sure that you had clumps of people, not that they were in common, but they were different, and so that they would be at war within themselves.
And never stable enough to self-rule. Never stable enough to self-rule. That's the important point. So thank you very much, Jason. Absolutely.
So you're saying then that the way the land was carved up wasn't arbitrary, not taking tribal alliances into account. It actually was intentional, taking tribal animosity into account.
So okay. It's important because This is the prophecy that Christ gave in the New Testament. When will you return? His disciples asked him. And he says, when you see the budding of the fig tree and all the trees, okay? So I'm going to show you that map with all the numbers on it, the dates when they came into existence after this event, the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916. And it's when the budding of the trees and all the trees, the fig tree and all the trees, happens because of this agreement. So this is why, people think, oh, our day and age is desolate. We don't have any more oracles. We don't have any more promises. And I'm like, guys, wake up. This stuff happened in modern times, and it's the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, and it's happening right before our eyes. So the budding of the fig tree and all the trees is due to the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916. Okay, so now I'm not going to be able to show this video, am I? Let's see. Well, let me do it, Walter. Okay. All right, I'm going to just keep going. So this talks about the Sykes-Picot, the two gentlemen who were in charge of all of this and how it happened. But its provisions were as follows. Russia would acquire the Armenian provinces of Erzurum, Trebizond, Van, Blitz, and some of the Kurdish territories to the southeast. France would acquire Lebanon and the Syrian littoral, and several of these other areas that we're talking about here. Great Britain would acquire Mesopotamia, Baghdad, and the Mediterranean ports of Haifa. And between the French and the British acquisitions would be the Confederation of States into a single independent Arab state dividing into the British and French sphere of influence. And Palestine, because of the holy place, it should be under international regime. So the reason they learned that was because of all, I'm reading another book right now about all the wars that have happened in Jerusalem and why the Crusades happened and what it brought about. So the thing I want you to remember is Europe needs control over the Middle East for two major reasons. Can you tell me what they would be? Yes, they need oil, and they have to make sure all these countries are going to be friendly to them. So they each try to choose a country that has a great aquifer of oil for their reserves. And what else do the French and the British really need to protect? The Suez Canal, absolutely. If they don't have that, they got pretty much nothing. They have to sail around the entire Horn of Africa. And the Sinai Suez Canal was built, I believe, in the 1860s. And it was owned until 1956, when we have the Sinai Peninsula, or the Canal War of '56. So these are the two gentlemen. That's the French one on the right, and Mark Sykes is on the left. George Picot is on the right. So again, when the Arab revolt began, Sharif Hussein was declared king of the Hejaz and also took the title of the King of the Arab lands. So really quick, I just want to say the British promised these guys everything. They said, if you fight with us, you help us, you spy for us, we go where we tell you to go and fight against the Ottomans, you'll be kings and queens of this whole land, you'll have your own powers, your own everything. All of those promises were dashed by the British. They did not follow through with any of them. Although Hussein had been given to believe that he would rule over the vast area of the Arab lands, in fact, many of those lands would be under either the direct or indirect control of the colonial powers, France and Britain. With the fall of the Ottoman Empire and the abolition of the Caliphate on March the 3rd, 1924, Hussein declared himself a legitimate caliph. Traditionally, the caliph was considered to be the commander of the faithful and the processor or Arab caliph of the Prophet Muhammad. But the Hussein's claim to the caliphate and all the Arab lands received little recognition from the Arabs of the Middle East and almost no recognition from Great Britain. Ultimately, Hussein was attacked and, receiving no help from the British, was defeated by bin Saud and his Wahhabi forces in 1924. Hussein went to exile first in Cyprus and afterwards to the Transjordan. So you're only important as long as you're useful. That was basically the way the British treated all these people who helped them during the war. Tell me about the Caliph. What What is it about the caliph? Who's read on it before? Or caliphate? Yeah. Okay. They were supposed to be the descendants from Muhammad, and they basically have spiritual rule, but they're looking for an ultimate one, sort of like our Messiah. So I just wanted to see if anybody else had more knowledge on it than me. All right, now we're getting into the time of Prime Minister Lloyd George, and he was a professed Zionist and helped get this whole thing started with the 1917 Balfour Declaration. So he embraced Zionism, reflected as a moral impulse to successor of the Jews after centuries of mistreatment. Actually, let me get somebody else, Casey, to read the slide.
Lloyd George's embrace of Zionism reflected a moral impulse to succor the Jews after centuries of mistreatment. It was also strategic, part of a worldwide effort to win public opinion over to Britain's side in the war. Since the war's outbreak, many Jews had sympathized with the Central Powers because Russia, the world's most anti-Jewish country at the time, was one of the allies. Lloyd George saw it as a wartime necessity to give Jews everywhere, and especially in Russia and America, an interest in Allied victory. In addition, serving as a Zionist protector would help Britain to justify regaining control over Palestine as part of the post-war peace arrangements.
Okay. So he sees this seething surge of anti-Semitism globally as a problem, much the same way as Herzl did and wrote out Neuland and said we should have a Zionist Congress and buy the land. So all these things are coming about because of this. What I want you to realize is each of these wars, when you look at it by historians, they can't give you a really good reason why they happened or what good outcomes came out of them. I want you as believers to see World War I cleared what? The land. It cleared it out for the Jews to return. World War II did what? It allowed the Jews to come home. World War III is going to bring what? The king. So each of these global wars is God using all the powers on earth to reshape maps, to move people, and to bring about his purpose. And he already told us he was going to do this in Psalms 2 and Isaiah 40. So it's coming about. Can I get another reader for this slide? And this is more about Prime Minister Lloyd George and establishing a national home policy for Israel out of the Balfour Declaration.
Mr. Lloyd George explains Jewish national home policy. I was Prime Minister when Balfour Declaration, Jewish Telegraphic Agency, April 13, 1931. Words can hardly express the gratitude I feel to you for the enduring honor you have conferred upon me by attaching my name to a colony in the Vale of Jezreel. Mr. David Lloyd George said, speaking at the dinner given in his honor by the English Zionist Federation at the Savoy Hotel last night. You will not be offended, he went on, if I tell you that the names of these valleys and hills in Canaan are as sacred to the Gentile as they are even to the Jew. I heard of Jezreel and Esdraelon, of Carmel and of Zion, before I knew of the existence in my own land of the valley of Morgan or of Penilimon. I am deeply gratified that you should think service such as I was able to render to the idea of a Jewish national home is worthy of such commemoration. I was Prime Minister of this country, Mr. Lloyd George said, when the idea of the Jewish national home took form as an act of state policy in the Balfour Declaration, and I presided over the councils of the Imperial Cabinet, which gave expression to that policy and secured for it the sanction of our allies. I was the principal delegate of the British Empire at San Remo, where the mandate for Palestine received its final shape and was conferred upon Britain.
Great. So the San Remo Conference happens in 1920, and it's to back up what happened in the Balfour Declaration. So the Balfour Declaration is Great Britain saying, through Lord George and others, including Cam Wiseman, who helped it move it along, that there would be a Jewish homeland in Israel, and It was very unspecific, very general, but the point is it gave shape to what was going to happen. Great Britain was antagonistic after World War II, not allowing Jewish refugees who had been in concentration camps even to come back to Israel. Tell me the story of the ship, the Exodus. Anybody know? Good. Back on Jason.
So, yeah, just after World War One,
World War II.
World War II.
World War II.
It sat there waiting to unload a bunch of Jews. Is that right? And then
Right.
it was basically prevented from unloading for a month or 2 months.
Yeah, so they went on
Yeah.
a starvation diet on the ship.
Yep.
It's a great movie. It's got Paul Newman in it. You will like it. It's called The Exodus. One of the most famous pieces of music that came out of it is also from there. So it's really unbelievable. They wrote this phenomenal document in 1917, and then they did nothing to help the Jews returning from Europe after this was over. So can I get another reader for this one? Go ahead.
Mr. Lloyd George explains Jewish National Home Policy. I was Prime Minister when Balfour Declaration, Jewish Telegraphic Agency, April 13, 1931. You could not hope in a decade to restore land restored to such a state. In addition to that, there were racial and religious suspicions and prejudices. These can always and everywhere easily be worked up into antipathies and antagonism. Pride of race is a fierce thing, very susceptible and quickly roused to anger. All religion is necessarily beyond and above reason. That may perhaps account for the fact that so many religious people are not amenable to reason. To carry through a challenging policy like that of the Jewish national home needed great tact and forbearance, but it also required unswerving courage and determination on the part of all those who were engaged in it. Zionism throughout the world had a divisive part to play. Decisive.
Yeah,
excuse me.
decisive, not divisive. But there's some great pieces of wisdom in here, and this is all true today. You're seeing all these things, that there's always everywhere, people will be worked up into antipathies or antagonism. Pride of race is a fierce thing, very susceptible and quickly aroused to anger. And this is more true today than it even was then. Did the baby have something to say? Just want to make sure it didn't have a comment. Okay. I knew it. So next up, I want to talk about this guy. Please remember his name, Aaron Aronson. Not only was his sister a phenomenal spy in Israel that helped the British, but he created the precipice of sustaining life in this area after they were gone. So Aaron Aronson was a Jewish agronomist, botanist, and Zionist activist who was born in Romania and lived most of his life in the land of Israel, then part of the Ottoman Empire. Aronson was the discoverer of emir, which is Citricum dichlorosides, which believed to be the mother of all wheat, basically, and he found it while hiking on Mount Hermon. What's the problem with our wheat today in America?
Genetically modified.
Genetically modified. And what's the biggest company that's in charge of this genetic modification of the wheat that we eat? Say it again? Monsanto. What has Monsanto done? I'm sorry? Not only that, but they control the wheat market. If their wheat blows into another field, they claim that basically being theirs as well. So to find the original wheat was a major thing, especially in this area, because it's resistant to one thing that they need in the Middle East: drought. So extremely important. After studying agriculture in France, sponsored by Baron Edmund von Rothschild, Aaron Aronson botanically mapped Palestine and its surroundings and became the leading expert on the subject. So when you bring the people back to the land, what are you going to need? You freed up the land, now you're about ready to bring back the people. What do you got to do? Feed them, be able to feed them. So he had a huge hand in that. That's his sister to the right. We're going to be talking about here, her. During World War I, the Ottomans joined sides with the Germans, and Aronson feared the Jews would suffer the same fate as the Armenians under the Turks. We talked about that. What did the Turks do to the Armenians? Genocide. They just mowed them down, buried them alive. It was almost a foreshadowing of what would happen to the Jews during World War II. Together with his assistant Avraham Feinberg, his sister, and a few others, Aronson organized Neely, a spy of Jewish residents in Palestine who spied for Britain during World War I. He recognized the plan of attack through Beersheba that General Edmund Allenby ultimately used to take Jerusalem in 1917 as part of the Sinai and Palestinian campaign. So it was his idea that got Allenby to win, because he gave him all the spy information he needed to make it happen, okay? He's never heard about anymore. It's always Allenby. Yes, John?
There's a Christadelphian connection to that second paragraph.
Okay.
Brother Ian Finley's father,
Mhm.
Doug Finley's grandfather, he was not a Christadelphian originally, and he was in December 1917. He was with Allenby's forces as a soldier, and he liberated Jerusalem. And it was when, I guess years later, he came in contact with a Christadelphian and connected those dots that the Finley family became Christadelphians.
What was his name, though?
Brother.
I forget. Well, if you can find out, that's really interesting, because it's cool to get those connections made. Owing to information supplied by Neely to the British Empire concerning the locations of oases in the desert, General Allenby was able to mount a surprise attack on Beersheba, bypassing the strong Ottoman defenses in Gaza. So these are all really incredible things, and it was Aaron Aronson who gave him the map, tell them where the oases were so that they could accomplish this. Okay, we're almost at the end of this. In 1915, with Avraham Feinberg and members of the families, Aronson organized Neely, the secret intelligence group, with the aim of assisting the British forces under General Edmund H. Allenby to conquer Eretz Israel and helping to create Zionist aspirations. Moving to Cairo, he helped the British headquarters there in planning the campaign and the invasion of Israel. In 1916, he visited London, where he circulated the memorandum for the future of Eretz Israel and helped them to make the idea of the Jewish national home in Israel part of the British policy in the Near East. In 1918, Aronson worked in conjunction with the Zionist Commission in Israel, and in 1919, he cooperated with the Zionist delegation in the Paris Conference, dealing especially with the problem of Israel's boundaries. In 1917, Chaim Weizmann sent Aronson on a political campaign to the United States. While there, Aronson learned that the Ottoman authorities had intercepted a Neely carrier passenger pigeon, which led to the arrest and torture of his sister Sarah and other Neely members. So all the good they had done, they got captured in the end, tortured and killed for helping the Zionist cause. After the war, Weizmann called on Aronson to work at the Versailles Conference. On the 15th of May, 1919, under unclear circumstances, Aronson was killed in a plane crash over the English Channel while on his way to France. Some blamed the British government. But this is where they all sat. President Wilson is right in the center of the table. Lord George, I believe, is to his right. But his maps and his influence, and he was a friend, obviously, of Lawrence of Arabia, really helped shape this time. I'm going to stop with this one after finish reading the slide. So Neely was a secret pro-British spying organization which operated under Turkish rule in Palestine during World War I under the leadership of the world-renowned agronomist Aaron Aronson. Neely is the acronym for the Hebrew phrase Netzah Yisrael Lo Shemaker, which means the Eternal One of Israel will not lie. It's from 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 29, which served as its password. Aronson's family was part of the early settlement of, I guess that's a kibbutz, which was first established in the 1880s. Aronson had achieved a wide acclaim for his discovery of weather-resistant forms of primitive wheat, With the support of the American Jewish Organization and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Aronson established an experimental agricultural station at Atlit, a small coastal village near the Carmel Mountains, where he conducted researches on farming. So this is part of the whole Neely spy ring. But what I want you to remember about Aaron Aronson is he discovered the mother of all wheat, which allowed them to feed the people that would be coming. And his spy ring with his sister Sarah helped give the British the victory in World War I around Palestine. We'll stop there and we'll pick up next week. I think we're out of time, if I'm correct.
Joe, one comment. Like all of this, everything you're showing us is providential, but sometimes you just have to pause and think about how providential.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So all these things, that's why I made the title of this whole thing, God's hand is in it all, because there's so many little nuances nobody knows about. But you all are going to remember the Sykes-Picot Agreement, right? Of 1916, because that really reshaped the whole Middle East into what it is. And Lawrence of Arabia being a Zionist and seeing the Jews return, he died, I think, before it ever became a nation. So thank you for your time, and we'll pick up with World War I again next week.